It's Saturday, and you know what that means. It is more play-by-play football talk here live on YouTube. As always, I am Brendan Donald, and joining beside me today is Sterling. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing all right. October, we got some nice weather, Thanksgiving weekend in Canada at least. Um, Looking forward to some football. I'm hoping I can finally watch my team win. I'm not super hopeful with them traveling to Buffalo, but we'll see what happens. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to some football this weekend. Not my team, not really your team. It is both of our teams at this point are just kind of they're just bad, and so yeah, there's I'm realistically speaking, I'm probably not going to end up watching my team play. I kind of made that vow after last week's New York Giants game that it was if the team is going to play this horrendously bad, that it might just not be worth it to even watch them playing just for my own mental health and safety. But yeah, your team going into Buffalo this week, Kenny Pickett, first ever career start in the NFL, going up against Josh Allen. It's going to be definitely going to be a tough one for your boys. That's for sure.
Yeah, it'll be an entertaining one for sure.
Yeah, but taking a look here at last week, I want to start about that just utterly thrilling game, possibly one of the best games we will ever see on a Thursday night game, where we saw the Indianapolis Colts go into Denver. And this game really should have been played in London because all it was kicking. Both teams, holy God, it was bad. It was just not a good game whatsoever. 10 total sacks that game, combination of both teams, 4 interceptions, no touchdowns. There's nothing else to say, but the Broncos. I know we like to joke about it a lot, but right now the Broncos, they really are the donkeys, and there's nothing that anyone can say or do to convince me otherwise that this team is worthy of actually being called the Broncos.
Yeah, they're neither of these teams looked good on Thursday. And the Broncos, with the amount of money they spent in that trade to get Russell Wilson to be playing this poorly as we're headed towards week 5 now, it's not good.
No, it's really not. And like what you said, they gave up a lot of draft capital to go out there and get Russell Wilson, but then they also gave Russell Wilson 250 something $1 million for the next 7 years. And what we've seen from Russell Wilson is when he was with Seattle, he was a Hall of Fame quarterback. But now watching Russell Wilson, if he struggles for the remainder of the year, I'm not going to say the Broncos pull the panic button and do this, that, and the other thing, but there's going to be a lot of question marks going, okay, is Nathaniel Hackett the guy? What do we need to do? And, going into next season, if Russell Wilson continues this play, there's going to be a lot of eyes on him and going, okay, if he continues to struggle like he did last year, like something has to change. But again, that all that money, man, new ownership, they can't be happy about this. Like that was easily one of the worst football games I think I've seen in a long time. And you and I have spoke about this before. We like low scoring games. We're big. Well, we're not the biggest fan of it, but like it's one of those things. You and I deal with it because we've seen it, and that means typically it's a defensive battle. This wasn't even a defensive battle because the defenses weren't even that good. It was just two teams looking across the field at each other and going, it's kind of like that South Park episode of where they're the Little League baseball teams and
Mhm.
they're like, I want you to win. No, no, no. We want you to win. And it's both teams fighting to give the opportunity for the other squad to win. Just like there's really no words. And then finally on that last play of the game where KJ Hamler was just completely wide open, and all Russell Wilson had to do was go, and the Broncos would have won.
Yeah.
There just no words.
No, no, it was boring, man. I turned it off. I couldn't even watch it.
Yeah, same. It's just one of the most frustrating games to watch in a long time. And, the fumbles, there were 6 total fumbles along with, the 4 interceptions. So it was just sloppy play by both teams. And if you would have told me at the beginning of the year, the top 3 team or the bottom 3 teams for points scoring, if you would have said the Bears would have been 31, I would have looked at you and said, "You know what? I'm not happy about that, but I can believe it." The Bears the last few years haven't really been a high scoring team, but it's because they've always had a good defense. They don't need to be high scoring. But
Yes.
I would have looked at that and been like, you know what? But if you would have told me that the Colts would have been 32 and the Broncos 30, I would have laughed at you. I would have mocked you. I would have just been like, there's no way. Jonathan Taylor on that team, Russell Wilson with all the weapons that he has around him, and, Javante Williams as well for the Broncos. Like, this right now, without a doubt, the Broncos have to be the most disappointing squad going into this year from what we expected. Obviously, we looked at them and said this was a team that could be fighting for the potential to win that division with the Chiefs and Chargers and the Raiders. The
But
Broncos,
you
if
mentioned the Raiders. That's another team though that's been surprisingly bad.
they have been surprisingly bad, but at least when they faced off against the Broncos, like they've just had a couple of situations of games where, week 1 they didn't play amazing. Obviously they went up against the Chiefs, so we expected the Raiders to walk away with a loss in that game. Then they just completely let it get out of hand with Arizona. And then the Titans, they just couldn't close that game out. And then finally they beat the Broncos. And then heading into this week, they have just taking a look here at the schedule to see who they're playing. They're playing Kansas City again, so a little bit of a tough road for them. But yeah, if you were to say to me that the Raiders were going to be 1-3 at the beginning of the year, I would have been like, they must have had some serious bad luck. But I
Mhm.
don't see that continue. But if you would have told me the Broncos would be 2-3 and has played as bad as they have been, I wouldn't have believed you. It there's just not a lot that I can really say
No,
about it.
it's been mind-boggling seeing how bad this Broncos team has been and how far apart the AFC West was when all offseason all we could talk about was how all 4 of these teams were going to be, at the top of the friggin' standings.
Division, yeah.
Yeah. They were all going to be going for a playoff spot. And now it's looking like it's not going to be that much of a race. Gives me more hope for a team to sneak in with a barely winning record in the AFC.
Well, right now, kind of the way that I'm looking at it is like what we said. Going into this year, we saw the Chiefs, and Chargers were kind of the favorites to win that division between us. I think you still had the Chiefs, and I was looking at the Chargers. Really, the only team that has done exactly what they need to do so far this year has been the Chiefs. Because even when you look at the Chargers, like, granted, they beat the wheels off of the Texans last week, and even then, like, beating the wheels off, they only beat them 34-24. So, and they're only a 2-2 team right now. Like, that is not where I thought they would be. If you would have said they were 3-1 going into week 5, I would have been like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know they play against the Chiefs week 2, be a very strong possibility, but they haven't looked good. It's just I guess maybe the hype for that division was just a little too much, and who knows? Again, we're only going into week 5. All 4 of these teams at the end of the year might not lose a game outside of the divisional matchups now.
Yeah.
Very,
Well,
very unlikely, but
I say that about both those teams on Thursday night. That was a horrible game, but both those teams in reality should trend upwards and be a potential playoff team come week 16, 17.
yeah.
Both of them have enough talent on their roster and they have a good enough roster that they should be playing for a playoff spot. They just had a very awful Thursday night game. It's been there's been a lot of misses on the Thursday night games this year. I think week 1 was the only one that was a really good game, and every other one has been either a bad game or just marred by injuries.
Yeah, I think we looked at week 2 was the first Amazon Prime Thursday night game where it was the Chiefs and Chargers. We were really excited about that one. And granted, it was still 27-24, but I think all of us were kind of let down by that game for that week 3 matchup. And then we went to the week 3, which was your Steelers versus the Browns. And the Browns really didn't have to do a whole lot to win that game, 29-17. Again,
No.
week 4, we saw the Dolphins and Bengals. Obviously the horrible injury to Tua for that game kind of put a sour note on it. And then this week, obviously, we got the Broncos and Colts. And next week, unfortunately, for week 6, it's not going to be any better. It's my
No.
Chicago Bears versus the Washington Commanders. And you're kind of looking at this going like, I would much rather, I know for Sunday we can flex these games. Like, for instance, we can take a team that's an 11 o'clock game and move it to Sunday Night Football. We need to have the ability, maybe like a week, 2 weeks in advance, to flex some of these games from Sunday to a Thursday, because again, no one wants to watch the Commanders versus the Bears. That's going to be another bad game. I would much rather have the week start out with the Buffalo Bills versus the Kansas City Chiefs. To me, for a Thursday night primetime game, yeah, give me that all week long. That's something that people can look forward to. And now after this last Thursday night game, we get to look forward to the Commanders and Bears. No one's going to be happy about that.
No.
Then going all the way to week 7, again, we don't really have that great of a matchup. We have the Saints versus Cardinals. Like, it's frustrating for sure, because you're just sitting back going like, why are we getting these bad primetime games? And then it's super, super frustrating.
Yeah. It is, but at the same time, I don't think they're too worried about the Thursday night games because I know their viewership usually isn't as good as Sunday and Monday prime time.
You would think now that Amazon is kind of the big boys on there that they would have potentially done a little bit better. But
Well, they might have, but like having 2 good teams to 2 bad teams, I don't think it's going to make a big difference in the viewership on a Thursday night, because if you're working Thursday night, it doesn't matter who's playing. You're not going to get to watch the game.
but a lot of people don't strictly work Thursday nights, and to the point, I know for you and I, when we were in the same industry as each other, we worked nights. We were there most nights until at least 9 o'clock, sometimes later than that. But for the majority of people, they're able to watch that for sure. But like, I don't know, man. Just like looking at this now, like again, looking at that week 7 matchup versus the Saints and Cardinals, just kind of like looking at the potential week for that. What games could we throw into that section? Again, the Chiefs 49ers could be a good matchup there. Just maybe like looking at it.
The other thing you run into is teams don't want to play on Thursdays.
Yeah, true, because it is
Especially
short
a team
week.
like the Chiefs. Could you imagine like putting one of the marquee teams on like multiple Thursday nights? Like you're just asking for injuries and burnout for that squad.
For sure, you
I
are,
really think
and
it's tough and it sucks having shitty games on Thursdays, but might as well keep the weak teams playing on Thursday night, get them out of the way, so we have good games on Sunday and Monday.
yeah. So I got 2 questions for you here. First one is, I know you were talking a little bit about how you think both the Colts and the Broncos have the potential come late season to be fighting for a playoff spot. If you had to choose one of these teams, which team would you be more confident from what you've seen so far this season to take that wild card playoff spot?
Probably the Colts.
I would have to agree with you on that.
I mean, the tough thing is both of those teams, they're going to be sitting probably 3rd place in their division and trying to get a wild card spot out of that. So that's going to be difficult. It really will come down to how those 2 teams perform within their own division. And the Broncos, I think, are just going to get swept right out of their division at this point. Whereas the Colts, I could see the Colts, winning the next game they play against the Texans, I could see them maybe winning a game against the Jags finally. I don't know. That's tough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It's a very, very tough thing to think about.
It's really muddy in the AFC right now. There's a lot of 2-2 teams and bad 1-3 teams and some good 1-3 teams as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, and of course, as we were talking about this, the second question that I had, which was actually the question that I liked more, I forgot instantly in my head. So I'll have to keep trying to think back to that. But yeah, going back to week 4, taking a look at some of these games, obviously we saw the Bengals now starting to get back onto a roll. Taking a look there at the box scores, one of the biggest things we're kind of looking at week to week is, first week with Joe Burrow got sacked 7 times, then he got sacked, I think it was 6 times against Dallas, then it was 2 times against in week 3, and then he was only able the line only gave up 1 sack that game. And so, maybe we're starting to see the Cincinnati Bengals really start to get that momentum back. And obviously, we talked a lot about that offensive line going into the season, how they need to get better, they need to improve, and they're starting to look that way now.
They are. They're starting to look like they're finally gelling a little bit, which is really good going into this week. I mean, they got a big Sunday night matchup against division rival Ravens. It's likely one of those two teams that are taking that division, and the Ravens have been red hot on offense. Luckily for the Bengals, the Ravens don't have a great defense this year, and so they should be able to keep Joe Burrow protected. And we could see another one of these, AFC shootouts that we've been seeing lately, whether it be the Bills, the Dolphins, the Bengals, the Ravens, they're all putting up big numbers on any given week.
Yeah, and it really is for the Bengals. They're looking at this going, the Ravens defense, there is so much frustration happening on this. Like the last 9 seasons, Harbaugh has only had 2 like complete meltdowns of 17 or more points in a game. This season, in just 4 games, he has 2. And you look at their defensive coordinator and Marcus Peters just losing his mind on the side. It's super frustrating. I know you're happy to see, a Ravens meltdown, but
what's funny about it though is that they've lost 2 games this season. They've only trailed on the score sheet for something like 11 or 14 seconds total across all of the games.
Yeah.
Like they've trailed for fewer than 30 seconds all season and have still lost 2 games, which doesn't bode well when you get into that playoff style of football where it's last possession usually wins. And if you can't stop the other team from scoring, you're not going to win.
Well, and that's just the biggest thing. Is one of the things we said about the Ravens going into this season is obviously we need to see what Lamar Jackson's going to look like. Lamar Jackson looks amazing. Like there's no questions about that. He's completely shown now that he is that true franchise quarterback, because there was always issues about, can he properly throw the ball? Is he going to be able to find his wide receivers? This year he completely eliminated that. Pay the man. Like, come on, we have basically the catchphrase now of Lamar Jackson's looking up at the stands and going, fuck you, pay me. That's really evident at this point. So we've seen that. But the other question we had is, once they get to the playoffs, are they going to be able to win? Because this has always been kind of the thing that has kind of hampered them the last couple of seasons. But yeah, funny enough, I just actually now remembered the other question that I had. So the Thursday night crew of Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit, what do you think of it?
On a, indifferent,
Indifferent.
Yeah, like I don't pay a whole lot of attention to color commentary. If the game's boring, I'll sometimes even turn the volume down and play a video game or something at the same time if it's that bad of a game. So it's very rare that I listen too much to the color commentators. In fact, last Sunday, the Jets and Steelers game, the first quarter, there were no color commentators, and it was magnificent. I was hearing game sounds and just the overhead announcer for the stadium, and I was like, "Oh my god, please let it be the rest of the game like this." And then, sure enough, second quarter rolled around, and we had guys jibber jabbering back and forth about bullshit and nothing.
Yeah, and I remember at one point you actually texted me that about that game. You're like, I kind of like this. It kind of makes me feel like I'm almost at the stadium itself. I
Yeah,
guess for me, kind of looking at it, since this is my job as well, play by play and color commentary. I guess I focus on these guys a little bit more. But I'm a big fan of Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit together. I think they do a really good job. You know, it's live football. There's always going to be situations when a commentator says something where you just sit back and go, "That's not right." Like, what is he saying?
yeah.
It stuff like that happens all the time. You can't really fault it unless Dan Orlovsky's talking. Then the dude says that every other play, but yeah, that was the other question that I had. Moving back on our ADHD tandem sometimes,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah, I mean, one
last
one of the other games I was wanting to look at from last week is I didn't end up watching this game, but it's the highest scoring game we've had so far this year, and it was two of the worst teams right now in the Seahawks and the Lions.
yeah,
Going down and putting up what was it, 93
48
points combined?
to yeah 48 to 45.
Yeah, just insane. Like I know neither of these teams had a great defense, but neither of them have a good offense either. So I was surprised to see that many points going on the board from that game.
Yeah, looking at the offense, like here's a stat: the Lions are 1-3. They have the highest scoring offense currently in the NFL.
Yeah.
They are the number one rated offense in the NFL, folks. Again, going back to preseason, if you would have told me that the Lions would have been the number one scoring offense with Jared Goff at quarterback, Jared Goff, ladies and gentlemen, at QB,
Yeah.
I would have looked at you and said, he's either on some performance enhancing drug or you're lying. Because
Yeah.
it's just not feasible. Like TJ Hawkinson had himself a game, like 8 catches, 179 yards, 2 TDs. Reynolds had 7 catches for 81 yards and a touchdown. Like, and their run game too. Like Williams, had 19 carries, 108 yards for another 2 TDs. But I think the other side of it, we have to look at Geno Smith and go, the dude has blown everyone away. I think we looked at this year and said the Seahawks without Russell Wilson, Geno Smith, we've kind of seen what he's capable of, and it's not a whole lot. And the Seahawks are going to be one of the worst teams in football. And Geno Smith has said, nope, I'm casually going to throw, 30 passes, complete 23 of them, go for 320 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interception, and not get sacked.
Yeah. It depends who they're playing against, though. Like the Seahawks, much like the Broncos, you don't know what you're getting from week to week. Like sure, they managed to beat a Lions team that for the last decade, they always seem to find a way to lose.
Yep.
But then at the same time, they lost at home to the Falcons last week.
Yeah.
Like you don't know
Another
what you're
team that
getting
we
on
think is a bottom dweller team.
right? Like so it's you can
This
give praise one week and then you look at them the next week and you go, what the hell? This is the worst team like we thought they were.
Yeah, this year is really, really strange for football because most years you can kind of go into a year and say, like, oh, we think this team is probably going to be the worst team. Like we always go into the year knowing about 3 to 4 teams that are going to be basement dwellers. And then there's probably like 3 or 4 teams that we think are probably also going to, like, they're kind of on the cusp, but you know what, they have a little bit of promise here or there, but they could very easily have at the end of the year like a top 5 pick or whatever, such and such. This year, those 3 or 4 teams that we said were going to be basement dwellers, for instance, like the Seahawks, like the Lions, like the Falcons, they have, and even to the point of the Texans, like they have been a lot better than what they've shown. Like again, the Seahawks are 2-2. They went out and beat the bad Broncos. Lions, they've been able to go out, do something, and even the Falcons are at the moment are 2-2. And obviously the Texans at the moment, they are 0-3-1, so they are currently the only winless team still remaining in football. The Raiders made the Texans a nice little lonely team there. But yeah, even then, like, the Texans were able to have a game against the Broncos. They were able to have a game against the Bears. Weren't able to have a game against the Chargers. Even then, they weren't far off. But like, for instance, a team like the Steelers, we knew they weren't going to win the division. We knew they weren't going to really realistically be a playoff team. I think even you knew deep down going into this year there weren't going to be a playoff team.
No, but looking at the schedule, I did not expect them to be 1-3 at this point. I more
Yeah,
expected them to be sitting at 3-1 and then fall off in the coming weeks when we have the Bills and the Patriots and all these other great teams that we're going up against coming up.
yeah, and for my Chicago Bears, people are gonna be surprised when I say this, but they're doing better than what I expected. I fucking they're 2-2, but they should be 0-4 right now. I think the Chicago Bears are the worst team in football.
Eh, it's hard to argue with that because I did see a stat today, and Cooper Cup has more receptions than Justin Fields has completions so
Yeah,
far this season.
and which is a fucking mind-boggling stat to think about,
Yeah,
because this is a guy who, after 3 weeks of football, had the lowest amount of passing attempts by any quarterback in the history since the 70s. Like, you're sitting back going like, how is that even possible? Like, he had something like less than 40 pass attempts in 3 weeks of football. Like, that just shouldn't be possible.
no,
Like, and last week he started to open it up a little bit more and was finding Darnell Mooney, but everything else was just, again, I'm not willing to give up on Justin Fields. I'm going to say we give him all of this year. We need to see what happens, but I said going into this season, I would like to see them finish with a draft spot of anywhere from 3 to 8. I knew they weren't going to be a playoff team. I knew they weren't going to be amazing. I didn't think they were going to be this bad, for instance, but I knew they weren't going to be a playoff team. And I
mhm,
was like, you know what? You get into that area of 3 to 8 range. If you're closer to that 3-4 range, you're realistically going to be looking at kind of like a Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, or, now but if you're kind of in that 5, 6, 7, 8 range, there's Paris Johnson Jr. Then you also have Jordan Addison, Jackson Smith, Najigba as well, like some of these guys, wide receiver and tackle. But now I'm looking at the number one overall pick, and I'm going, if the Bears get the number one overall pick, I don't believe you draft a new quarterback. I
really.
the reason that I say that is because if the Bears, for instance, go out and draft a new quarterback, all you're doing is that you're looking at Justin Fields and going, well, we didn't really give you the best amount of help that we possibly could have done. So we're just going to draft a new guy, whether that's CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, either of the two. And we're just going to put these guys who are rookie quarterbacks. And at that point, everyone knows that Justin Fields isn't going to be your guy. You're not going to start Justin Fields for the year and let's just say it's Bryce Young who they draft, let him sit on the bench and go, you're going to sit here and learn behind Justin Fields. You'd have to trade him away. I don't know which team, seeing the performances, would look at the Bears and give him anything. I think if the Bears had the first or second pick, you are drafting Will Anderson, and there's no other option.
Fair. I mean, I would say if you're not taking one of those quarterbacks, you should be trying to trade down and beef up your draft stock at that point.
I agree with you on that, but here's why I say the Bears, if they have the first or second pick, Will Anderson, if he was 6'5", 260 pounds, he would be considered a generational edge rusher. The only reason he's not is because he's 6'4", 240.
Yeah.
That is the only difference, is that if he was just an inch higher or taller and maybe a little 20 pounds heavier, and then him getting to the NFL, I'd expect him to beef up to 250 anyways. Again, I know the Bears need tackles and they need wide receiver help, but you cannot pass up on a player of that talent. And again, I'm looking at this going, I would love to have Will Anderson, but I would rather the Bears do better, get a later pick, and so we have that option of just saying, you know what, we're pick number 6. Jackson Smith-Njigba is right there. We're gonna pick him. Boom, that's our issue done. I'd rather not have that controversy because, again, everyone's going to look at that and go, well, you need wide receiver help. And if you draft another quarterback, that's a whole clusterfuck right there. But, if you draft Will Anderson, it's like, well, you needed a wide receiver. It's such a tough situation that I just don't want to see. But that's my little rant for the Chicago Bears. We have some change for the Pittsburgh Steelers coming into this week, which I think we're both probably happy about. We don't have to see Mitch the Bitch Trubisky at the starting quarterback position. We finally get to see the 20th overall pick for your Pittsburgh Steelers this year in Kenny Pickett. Really unfortunate that he has to go up against the Buffalo Bills, for his opening start.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I feel for Mitch Trubisky. Mike Tomlin said it best. Mitch didn't play bad. He didn't take the chances he needed to take. And we saw that last week when they swapped quarterbacks at halftime. There were several plays where I saw the side-by-sides of the same play being called, Trubisky and Pickett, and Trubisky is looking at option 1, 2, and then pulling the ball down, running with it up the gut, taking a sack, something, Whereas Kenny Pickett is standing there going 1, 2, and then he's coming across and seeing Pat Freiermuth or George Pickens or somebody that's open down the middle of the field, where Mitchell Trubisky just wasn't giving the O-line enough time and giving himself enough trust to look across to his third and fourth options.
Yeah.
It's almost like it was self-preservation. He was like, okay, if I throw a bunch of interceptions, I'm done in this league. But at the same time, if I take a bad blindside hit and I get injured, I'm done in this league. He was looking at it going, I need to be like a Jacoby Brissett, where I just don't turn the ball over and hopefully win some games as a result. And it just didn't work out for him. Honestly, because TJ Watt got injured. I think if TJ Watt had been playing the last 3 weeks, we'd be sitting at 3-1 instead of 1-3.
Interesting.
The only loss we would have had probably would have still come against the Browns because they just ran the ball hard against us.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think if Watt was in there, we'd be sitting at 3-1. We wouldn't be having this discussion because it would be okay. Mitch's game management style has been able to get us wins, because you look at those losses and the win that we had, even that one against the Browns where they ran up the score at the end, it was all one possession games. It's all a matter of, you get the ball back, 2-minute drill, and you've got the guy, which we're hoping Kenny Pickett is. He can drive down the field and score a touchdown, win the game, just like Ben Roethlisberger did so many times in his career, and there's a lot of people drawing parallels this week to Ben Roethlisberger. Roethlisberger's first start came against the number 1 pass defense, and he won that game. And so everybody's looking at Kenny Pickett going, okay, you're going up against the number 1 pass defense in the league. Can you do like Ben did and win?
And, going back to Trubisky here for a second, one of the biggest things for Trubisky when he was in Chicago is that he struggled to read defenses. So that's where a lot of the interceptions came from. And he really was only capable of looking at his first read. And then most of the time, if the second read wasn't on that same side, it was immediately look to the check down or run. And you kind of hoped that when he was in Buffalo, he would have learned otherwise to kind of move on from that. But that's exactly what you saw in Chicago. The difference between Trubisky and Brissett, because I like the parallel that you were doing there, because that's a very good thing to look at. Obviously, Trubisky only signed that 2-year deal. But with Brissett, he's capable of going 1, 2, 3 check down. Yeah. But Trubisky's capable of going 1 check down.
But the issue is he's not even using that check down
Yes.
because Najee Harris has something like 40 fewer touches up to this point in the season as he did last year. And Ben Roethlisberger, that was his primary target last year, was check down to Najee Harris.
Yeah.
Because that O-line was so bad last year that Ben only had something like 3.6 seconds per snap. And so he literally only had time to look at one and check down. And if Mitch was even utilizing Najee Harris in that way, at least, and getting him those check down passes, I think we would have seen different outcomes to these games as well. But Trubisky, for some reason, he was so afraid of turning the ball over that he would rather pull it down and try to run for 2 or 3 yards than take a chance. And we saw it last week in the second half. Kenny Pickett, he said he's not afraid to take those chances. He's like, You know what? I'm a rookie. I'm going to make some mistakes. I'm going to turn the ball over. But I have faith in these receivers. If you're one-on-one down there, that ball's coming at you, and you better catch it. If you don't, I'm not going to be mad. I'm not going to throw a fit. I'm not going to come on the sideline screaming at you because you tipped it up and it was an interception. I'm going to come back to you the next play. You need to make those catches because I'm going to put that ball where you guys can catch it. You need to do better than the D-backs, and you need to go up and get it. And that's something Trubisky was not willing to risk.
No, and in the NFL, and that's one of the things that I will always say with the rookies is that they need to have that mentality, and that's why I want to see them first year starting right away, especially if you're a first round pick, is because I want you to go out there and use the first year. One thing I will always say about a rookie quarterback's first year is it's a throwaway year. Doesn't matter if you throw 27 picks, doesn't matter if you throw 27 touchdowns. Your first year is a throwaway year because you are just figuring stuff out. And defenses are also trying to figure you out. I would rather have a rookie quarterback in Kenny Pickett who is going to say, you know what? I don't care if I throw 30 interceptions this year and I only throw 10 touchdowns. I'm going to know, he's going to learn at that end of this year what works, what doesn't, and he's going to have a full offseason. He's going to have a new offensive coordinator, knock on wood, praise to all your gods, but, pray to the old gods and the new. He's going to have someone who's going to be able to help him. I'm sure the Steelers are going to beef up that offensive line again, too, because they still need to work on that. So that's going to be good for them.
They do, but that O-line is the reason that I still wouldn't go back and start this season differently. I still wouldn't go back to week 1 and start Kenny Pickett instead, because the offensive line from week 1 to week 4 last week, they made such great strides. I'd say they're probably one of the most improved O-lines from week 1 to week 4.
They are one of those teams that is improving week to week to week, exactly. And it's good to see.
Much like the Bengals did. Like that O-line's improving, and they've improved much quicker this year than they did last season, which is promising. Because you've got this young rookie coming in who's not afraid to take the chances. And maybe that brings a little bit more attention to the passing game, which is going to open up some more opportunities for Najee Harris. And we're going to finally get to see Najee do some things as well. This is the best possible time for the Steelers to make this change.
I agree.
As they were saying last week, it's just Mitch is not winning the games for us. He's just not losing the games for us, which it's not good enough in this league. And it's especially not good enough in the AFC North. You need a quarterback that's going to go out there and win the game for you.
Well, when the rest of the quarterbacks in the division all have their franchise guy, Bengals obviously have Joe Burrow, the Ravens obviously have Lamar Jackson, and as much as we, shit on the Browns for having Deshaun Watson, when he's playing, he's a top 5 quarterback. That love him or hate him for what he had done, allegedly, not allegedly, off the field. When the dude is on the field playing football, he's a top 5 quarterback. And if the Steelers can't figure out a way to match that right now, they're going to be in the dumpster of that division for the next 10 years until they figure out how to get a quarterback, and all these other guys are either old or gone. So, but yeah, no, I agree with you. And another thing that you and I were texting about over the weekend is that, there's no hiding for Matt Canada anymore.
Nope.
He said this was the guy that he wanted. This was the perfect offense for Kenny Pickett. And, again, granted, they had a quarterback change mid-game. So sometimes it's hard for a coordinator to kind of change up the game plan they built for the entire week. Now, Matt Canada has Kenny Pickett in there, who he said was the guy that he wanted and the guy that could run his offense the best.
And
If the Steelers continue to struggle moving the ball, when's their bye week? Week 8?
week 9, I think.
Week 9? Yeah. If they can't continue to get that going and the offense still struggles, get Canada out of there. Like Snoop Dogg said, get that bum out of there.
Well, I mean, that being said, last week, it was the defense that cost us that game. Because Kenny Pickett came in the second half and he scored 4.
Yep.
Lead. The defense just could not hold Zach Wilson and keep him from scoring again. That was the problem. Granted, Kenny Pickett had to run for both of those touchdowns, but you take those 3 interceptions away and that's a very different outcome to that game. And so I think things are looking up for sure, but it is Matt Canada's on the hot seat now in that offensive coordinator position, because this is his 3rd quarterback under this play calling scheme that he wants to introduce to the NFL that he thinks is the next big thing, and it didn't work with Roethlisberger, who is a Hall of Fame quarterback.
Yep.
It didn't work with Mitchell Trubisky, who was a former number 2 overall pick. And so now you got the guy you wanted the Steelers to draft. You better pray that this offensive play calling style you have works with this guy. Otherwise, you're going back to college ball.
Yeah, and he can't hide behind the fact that if he's like, oh, we played Buffalo, like, it's like, okay, we're going to give you Buffalo.
It doesn't matter who you're playing.
Yep.
Because you know what? This team and this city, it's playoff or bust, which means you want to make the playoffs. Who are you going to have to beat in the playoffs? You're going to have to beat the Bills. You're going to have to beat the Chiefs. You're going to have to beat the Ravens, the Bengals, the Dolphins. All of these teams are phenomenal teams. You have to beat these teams. And coming up the next 4 weeks until that bye, it is a big stretch for them. I mean, they've got
they have the Buccaneers in week 6, and then looking at week 7, they have the Dolphins. So again, depending on who's playing that, but yeah, those are all 4 games of where the defenses are all very, very good. But again, exactly like what you're saying, it doesn't matter. You have to be able to beat these defenses in the playoffs, or if not, maybe not necessarily beat, but you have to show that you have competency going up against these teams. Because again, do I look at the Steelers this week and go, even if the offense starts to click, can they beat the Buffalo Bills? I think no. Again, we'll get into our picks here in a little bit, but a little bit of a spoiler for me, I guess. But I'm not picking the Steelers to beat the Bills. The Bills are just too good of a team. And again, first time rookie quarterback, first starting game. Again, I don't have any confidence in Matt Canada, even with Kenny Pickett in there. Then you go up against the Buccaneers. You have to show you have competency there. Look at what Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs were able to do. And I would say the Steelers have maybe not as good of weapons, but they're damn close. Obviously, the wide receiver core, the running backs, Pat Freiermuth is starting to get a little bit better. I wouldn't classify him as a great tight end yet, but he's making progress week to week from what I've seen.
And I think that's the quarterback he had, unfortunately. Because as I said, Mitchell Trubisky wasn't making it to that 3rd option, which was Freiermuth.
Yep.
Is your 3rd look on most of those play calls. And one other thing I did see in the second half last week that's promising is Mitchell Trubisky was not allowed to call an audible at the line of scrimmage. They didn't trust him to do that. Kenny Pickett audible multiple times last week in his first half a game. So that tells me already that they have more confidence in him being able to read the defenses than Mitchell Trubisky. And that is key going forward, because if you can't audible and a team starts to key in on what you're doing, then you're not going to move the ball, because they're going to go, oh, we've seen this lineup before. We know what they're running. Whereas if you've got a quarterback that can go in there and go, okay, I can see they're going to rush at me this time. I'm going to call a slant, out of this instead of throwing the screen, and I'm going to be open over the middle of the field.
Yes, I agree.
He wasn't trusted to do that. Pickett hopefully will be.
Yeah, last game for us to talk about in week 4, I want to bring up the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in that Sunday Night Football game. Man, oh man, like this kind of felt like a revenge game for the Chiefs after that Super Bowl loss a couple of years ago, of course, where the Buccaneers played in Tampa Bay, their home crowd, and they just dominated the Chiefs. And Tom Brady has always really been the only quarterback that we looked at against Patrick Mahomes and said he's going to beat him. And it felt like a very big statement game for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Mahomes didn't. He did exactly what he needed to do. 3 touchdowns, threw an interception, only 249 yards. But then you look at Tom Brady on the opposite side, threw 52 times, 385 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, only was sacked once, had no running game whatsoever. They got a total of 3 rushing yards off of 6 attempts. So, you know, but the Chiefs, they just seem so determined. Like it kind of just felt like they were obviously having that revenge game against the Buccaneers, but it was also kind of like a revenge game of going, we beat ourselves last week against the Colts. It was really bad. We didn't play well. We need to go out there and dominate. And boy, did they do that against a very, very scary looking Bucks team.
Yeah, that was. It was almost a double revenge game for the Chiefs because they were coming off a loss to the Colts as well. And so they knew that in their division, they can't go and lose 2 weeks in a row. And then going into that hostile territory in Tampa Bay, with a fired up Tom Brady.
Especially with all the rumors going around with him and his wife.
Yep.
So, but yeah, it is going to be very, very interesting to see this team just continue to play the way that they are. And man, oh man, the Chiefs, they do be looking scary.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
there were a few of those statement games from those big teams last week. The Chiefs coming out and doing that to the Bucks. Even Josh Allen and the Bills winning that game against the Ravens at the last minute, showing
yep,
that they are capable of winning games on those final drives, and stealing games away from people, which, if we come down to a Bills Chiefs AFC championship again, the Bills are going to have to show that.
yeah, and that's the one thing that we've seen the last 2 years now is that the Chiefs are able to beat out the Bills when it matters most, and so that's obviously a frustrating thing for the Bills. But moving forward now into Week 5, first game of the week here, we have the New York Giants who are 3-1 versus the 3-1 Green Bay Packers. What's your thoughts on this game?
Oh, well, we're heading back to London again this week. So this is another London game, early start. I believe something like a 7:30 a.m. kickoff for
Yep,
us.
yep.
Um, these games are always tough to predict, much like last week. They got a phenomenal game last week that came down to a kick that ended on a double doink.
Don't say it. Oh, you had to say it.
I had to say it, yes,
Oh,
because you have
gotta I
nightmares,
gotta take off my headset,
right? You
and not
wake
be able
up
to hear.
at least
You get
once
to
a
see my
week,
more bald ass head right now. Oh,
and you hear it dinging in your dreams all the time, I'm sure. So
boy.
it's tough to predict these games, but it's still prime time quality, and Aaron Rodgers turns it on at that time.
Yes.
And so it's hard for me to believe this is the first time Aaron Rodgers is going to be playing across the pond, though. So who knows what we're going to see out of him. I feel like the Giants are missing too many pieces this week to be able to squeeze out a gritty win against this Packers squad.
Yeah, and the Giants obviously being 3-1, they beat the Titans, who are not the same team that they were. They beat the Panthers, who aren't necessarily a great team, and then they made mincemeat out of the Chicago Bears. To me, the Packers just seem like the better overall team. But you know what? The way to beat Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers is to have a strong run game and make sure that Aaron Rodgers is not on the field. And what do the New York Giants have? They have like quite possibly the best looking back in the NFL this year in Saquon Barkley, who's finally after what seems like the last 2 years showing that former number 2 overall status and the kind of generational talent tag that he had placed on his name. And he's again getting back to that old ways, but I just don't think that the Giants are going to be able to to stop the Packers. The rollouts, the Packers are not going to let that happen. They saw the Bears get exposed by that time in, time out. They're not going to allow that to happen. And it's really, can they stop Saquon Barkley? And if they can stop Saquon Barkley, it's going to be, all right, Daniel Jones, you have to beat us.
Yeah.
And I don't trust Daniel Jones.
No, and that's just it. If Daniel Jones takes a bad hit and has to come out of the game again, like last week, rolling out like that, Tyrod Taylor's not available to come in. Tyrod Taylor's out with a concussion this week, and so you don't have that second quarterback who's the same play style as Daniel Jones, where you can just plug him in and go, okay, we're calling the same plays, no worries.
Yep.
And I think that's ultimately going to be the issue. Is Aaron Rodgers is just, he's going to be able to put points up faster than the Giants can
keep him off. Yeah.
I want the Giants to win, but I think the Packers are going to win this.
Yeah, I would love to see the Giants beat the Packers in London at Tottenham Hotspur's stadium. But I don't see the Giants going out there and being able to beat the Packers. But moving over to the next game, we get to see your Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Buffalo Bills. Again, we've kind of talked quite a bit about the Steelers, so we'll kind of breeze through this one a little bit more. What's your prediction for this game?
Yeah, I'm not going to rant and rave on this one. I'm looking forward to the game. I'm hoping Pittsburgh can win, but I'm picking the Bills to win this game purely because, Josh Allen has been lights out this year compared to past years. He's turned it to another gear. He's tearing up defenses, and TJ Watt's not out there.
Yes.
If TJ Watt was in the lineup, I would probably be going the other way with this, because I think the Steelers with a rookie quarterback and TJ Watt in there would have that fire. That being said, they're 14-point underdogs for the first time since the merger.
Holy shit.
And this Pittsburgh Steelers team plays with a chip when they're underdogs, and they've never been as big an underdog as they are this week. So I really hope they surprise me and hand me a loss, as well as the Buffalo Bills, because I am picking the Bills this week.
Yeah, I'm also picking the Buffalo Bills, like what we talked about earlier. I just have more faith in the Buffalo team. They're just a better overall unit. Even if TJ Watt was in there, I would still feel more comfortable picking the Bills. But moving over to the Chargers and Browns.
Chargers, Browns. Justin Herbert's been looking better. I don't think he's hurting quite as bad as he was. And the Browns just lost to the Falcons.
Yep.
Sure, they've looked good a couple weeks, but they've looked bad a couple weeks as well. And the key is stopping Jacoby Brissett in the run game. And this Chargers defense has shown they can stop the run game. Yep. And so I don't think Chubb's going to be able to run quite as easily as he has against other teams. And I think the Chargers are going to pull out a win this week.
Yeah, I'm looking at this game going, I'm picking the Chargers just because I think these first few weeks for the Chargers, it's been a really big low end for them. Obviously, with Justin Herbert being hurt, I think obviously they got a lot of confidence back last week, beating the Texans the way that they did. I think they're going to come out full force swinging, and I think this is going to be a Chargers. This is going to be one of those games where the Chargers are like, we are who we said we were at the beginning of the year. And you got to put that respect back on our name. Yes, we're at 500 right now. I think they're going to end up taking this one. For this next game, we're going to breeze right through it. Vikings are winning. All right, and now we're talking about the Lions and Patriots. Who you got for that one?
This was one of the tough ones for me because, as we've said, the Lions are the highest scoring team in the league, but it's hard to bet against Bill Belichick. This one's I've waffled on this all week because there's injuries on both sides of the ball. Both teams are beat up right now. I think the Lions might be able to put up enough points to beat this Bill Belichick team because they're not scoring a ton of points. They almost pulled a win out against the Packers.
Yep.
But I just don't think they're going to be able to keep that momentum without their starting quarterback in there. So I'm going to take a chance here, and I'm going to pick the Lions for this game.
You're going to, if you want to, talk about the Bears Vikings game, go right ahead. But,
I'm picking the Vikings in that game as well. The Bears they haven't shown me enough. I have more confidence that Kenny Pickett's going to come out this week and surpass Justin Fields' completion total on this season in one game.
Yep. All right. But, I don't blame you on that one. But yeah, Lions and Patriots. Right now, the Patriots are looking like the favorites, but I don't know with how good this Lions team has been playing so far this year, and the Patriots. Granted, yeah, they gave the Packers a run for their money. I just don't think they're going to be able to compete with that high octane offense. And I don't like betting against Bill Belichick, but I'm going to agree with you. I think the Lions are going to take this one.
Right? Like that's what I mean. This was one of the tough ones this week because it's hard to go against Bill Belichick, especially against a team like the Detroit Lions that so often show us they can find new and unique ways to lose. And I'm sure they're going to do that to us this week again, but looking at the stat lines, the Lions should be able to win this game.
Yeah, they should be able to, but just like what you're saying, they find new and creative ways every single week and year to lose a game that they should have won. And you know, I would not rule out a 70-yard field goal attempt at the end of the game for the Patriots to win it.
Yep.
The words getting tongue twisted here. The New Orleans Saints versus the Seattle Seahawks. This is another weird kind of game to take a look at because
Mm-hmm.
both teams are bad, but and they're not. I just don't know where to kind of look at this game. I have the Saints winning this game, but this is one of those ones where I could easily flop it back over to the Seattle Seahawks side because Geno Smith has looked really, really good. But like what we were saying earlier, this team, you just don't know what you're going to get out of them. And it's so hard to really judge what's going to happen.
It really is. And you know what? The Saints were my pick as well at the beginning of the week, but I've been looking at this game more and more, and they're 1-3, and the only win they had was when Jameis Winston played that whole game,
Yeah.
and then he got hurt partway through the second game, and they lost, and they've lost, and they've lost, and Jameis Winston is still sitting on that injury report, and he's doubtful to play this weekend too. And I have a hard time believing the Saints team can get any wins without Jameis Winston behind center right now. And so I am going to flip my pick here at the last minute, and I'm going to take the Seahawks to win this one.
There's always one of those games where we sit back and go, like tomorrow morning, I could very easily have the Seahawks as my pick. Very, very difficult to kind of really take a look at here, but I don't. It's so difficult because both of these teams, you just don't really know what you're gonna get, and it'll be very interesting. I am gonna keep my pick for the moment.
Mhm.
This, the New Orleans Saints again. If James Winston plays tomorrow, I'd feel more confident in it. But it's a very, very tough one. But moving forward, we have the Miami Dolphins versus the New York Jets.
Another one that this one's only difficult because of the injury report, honestly.
Yes.
Like I was looking at this one, and if they had Tua Tagovailoa, it's an easy win for the Dolphins. But they've also got guys like Tyreek Hill that are hurting right now and sore, and I just wonder if this is where we're going to start to see the collapse of the Dolphins this year because of the injury to Tua Tagovailoa. And the Jets, they've got a chip on their shoulder now. They went into Pittsburgh and they won, which they never are able to do. And then they're going back home this week and hosting the Dolphins. I think the Jets are going to shock the NFL and they're going to beat the Miami Dolphins this week.
Even with all the injuries to the Miami Dolphins, I have a little bit of confidence in Teddy Bridgewater to be able to go out there and kind of slow the game down, bring it back more to like the game manager type of situation that we've seen from Teddy Bridgewater. He's kind of like a Jacoby Brissett in that way of just like he's one of those guys where if you just tell him to just be the game manager, I think he can win, but this could be a lot closer than what it is. Right now, the spread is only minus 3.5 for Miami. So, for all of our betters out there,
Yeah,
but
and
yeah,
I don't disagree. Teddy Bridgewater, good quarterback, that they're in good hands. But this comes down to who's playing quarterback for the Jets. If it was Joe Flacco in there, then the Dolphins win.
yeah,
But Zach Wilson's back, and he
it
looked
is.
good last week, and that was in him playing timid, him
Yeah.
slow playing, and a win against the Steelers is just going to boost his confidence. And we still have not seen the breakout game for Brees Hall.
Yep. That very,
It's
very,
it's
very
got to
true.
come at some point. I thought it was going to be last week against Steelers defense, and he had an okay week, but it wasn't that breakout week that showed he was the best back in the draft. And it's got to come at some point here. Maybe it's against the division rival Dolphins.
Maybe I'm still gonna stick with my Miami Dolphins pick just because I do feel like even with some of the injuries the Miami Dolphins have, they are the better team, and I feel like they want to look at everyone else around them and say, yes, Tua's out, but we're more than just Tua, and so that's why I have them. But taking a look here at the next 11 o'clock game where we have the Atlanta Falcons versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. For me, this game is in Tampa Bay. With what we saw from Tom Brady last week against the Kansas City Chiefs, he has his weapons back out there. He's
Yep.
playing with confidence. And I think the fact that, particularly this last week, there's just been so much conversation surrounding him and Giselle and their marriage. I think he's just going to go out there. He's going to look at the Atlanta Falcons and he is going to shit on them.
Yeah. I agree. The Buccaneers are going to win this game handily. What they need to do, though, is they need to find a way to get the run game going, because you're not going to be able to win consistently going forward when you got a guy like Leonard Fournette who nets -3 yards across a game. That is not good enough. They have to do better in their run game. They have to
Yes.
find a way to get him going. Maybe it's bringing in the backup instead. If Fournette's not getting it done, they got to figure out some way. Tom Brady is too old to be throwing it 52 times a game. I don't care how good he is.
Yeah,
Like
I
at
think
that
that was
age,
more of like a unique game. Like they were just like at the
it
beginning of
was.
the game, they definitely got behind, so they had to move to that throwing. But I agree with you fully
Yeah.
against this Atlanta Falcons team. You need to open up that run game, and I would realistically try to make sure Brady doesn't throw it above 30 passes.
Yeah. Yeah. Try and manage this game a little bit better. Get some more plays going on the ground. You don't have to worry too much. The Falcons don't have a whole lot of playmakers. Pitts is out this week. He's not dressing. And so really, what do they have? Drake London. That's about it.
Yep. Yeah.
And so I don't see the Falcons being able to do very much this week. Bucks win this one easily.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Moving over, we have the Tennessee Titans versus the Washington Commanders. And this is another one of those games where you look at it and go, it feels like there's a very obvious choice, and I feel like both of us would look at that and go, it's the Titans. But then again, the Titans have looked so poor this season. Like they don't have a great defense. It feels like their defense completely went away. And if you can kind of control Derrick Henry, it feels very winnable. But on the opposite side, you also have Carson Wentz, who at one point had a lot of passing yards. I'm just like taking a look here at the stats. Like, he has 8 passing touchdowns, but he also have 5 interceptions. So this is one of those games where I'm not confident in really either team. I'm going more towards the Tennessee Titans. I feel like they've started to get their mojo a little bit more back. Obviously, this last week they beat the Colts, who are the division rival. And then the week prior to, they got their first win against the Las Vegas Raiders. And Derrick Henry starting to look more like himself. And I just think the Commanders, I'm not confident in Carson Wentz. I've never been confident in Carson Wentz. And I think the Commanders are going to lose this game solely because of Carson Wentz.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be solely because of Carson Wentz. It's going to be a team effort, this loss. But I disagree in the difficulty level in picking this game. The Titans are starting to look like the Titans of last year. They looked a little bit better against the Raiders. They looked a lot better against the Colts at managing that ground and pound style. Because you got to remember, this wasn't a Titans team that won the AFC by putting up 45 points a game.
True.
They've won the AFC by exhausting defenses that they went up against, and then their defense standing on its head.
Yes.
They've had a lot of injury issues in their defense so far this year, but they have, in my opinion, still the best defensive minded head coach in the league.
They definitely have one of the best defensive-minded head coaches in the league
Exactly.
for
And so
sure.
I have faith that this Titans defense is just going to continue to get better. They don't have to be the number one defense to win as long as Derrick Henry keeps shaking off this rust that we saw him with the first couple weeks. He took that big hit in week 2, and I think it pissed him off
Yeah.
because it
Yep.
was the only time we've ever seen him take a big hit and get laid out. And I think that made him mad. And he's showing it. He's running mad now. And this Commanders defense is broken. They've got guys hurt, they've got guys out, and he is going to make them look like a JV football team. It is
He's gonna make them look like the Pee Wee teams I was
it is
calling
not going
earlier.
to be pretty. This Commanders team now, we talked about it after week 1, how, oh, hey, maybe they're not the Commanders that everybody thought they were going to be. They got a win in week 1, but it was against the Detroit
Panthers.
Lions.
What was? Oh, you're right. It was against the
Right?
Lions.
And it was really the Lions found a way to lose.
Yep.
And now the Commanders are sitting in 1-3, and we're going, oh, okay, yeah, this is the Commanders team we thought we were going to get.
Going back to that old phrase, they are who we thought they were.
Exactly. They're easily going to lose this NFC East division. They're going to be one of the bottom 5 teams. They're going to have a good pick next year. They can get somebody in there to pair with the quarterback they drafted this year. It's a team that's looking towards the future. This Commanders team is not good.
So, question for you.
Yes.
If, let's say, the Commanders end up with the second pick, and both Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are there, would you see the Commanders drafting one of those two guys?
I would.
Yeah.
I would take Bryce Young.
Yeah.
You and I disagree on who's the number one. I'm hands down, Bryce Young is the number one for me as far as these two quarterbacks go. If Young is there, I don't care what spot you're picking at. I don't care who you have at quarterback. Unless it's Patrick Mahomes, you're taking Bryce Young. If the Pittsburgh Steelers have the first overall pick,
you're taking Bryce Young?
They take Bryce Young.
Wow.
Yes, I'm sorry. I love Kenny Pickett, and I think there's 0% chance we have the first overall pick because I think with this quarterback change, the team's going to turn it around. We're going to be where we always are lately in that 14 to 17 pick range. But you do. Bryce Young is going to be a generational talent. He's going to be a phenomenal quarterback in this league. He is already NFL ready. He's gonna have a better rookie year than almost anybody we've seen lately. Like whoever gets him this year, they're gonna have a turnaround year next year.
You heard it here, folks. You heard it here first, folks, that Bryce Young going to be the best quarterback in the league come 2 years down the line.
Well, best drafted quarterback next year. He's not going to be better than Patrick Mahomes, but if the Commanders get him, the Commanders immediately have a chance to compete in that division.
Yeah. But yeah, taking another look here, we have two division rivalries. One team that could potentially be looking at drafting Bryce Young in the Houston Texans versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. To me, the last 2 weeks, the Jags have really started to come in their own. They've started to play a lot better, and they're really starting to look like the team that we expected from them. Yes, they are 2-2, but Trevor Lawrence is really starting to shine, and this Jacksonville defense, that front seven, man, is very, very scary. And I'm just gonna say it now. It is the Jacksonville Jaguars for me all the way.
I agree 100%. I mean, they went up against the best team in the league right now last week in the Eagles, the only undefeated team left. So
they still played really, really well.
Right? They did. They showed really well against a team that's sitting number one right now. And so I don't really take that as a step back for the Jags. That was a tough game, and after coming off a tough game where they beat the Chargers finally on the road, they finally got that road win for Trevor Lawrence. This is a big division game, and that's what the Jags need to be focusing on. They need to worry about winning their division. They don't need to worry about being the number one seed. They have to win their division. Yep. And to do that, you got to beat the Colts, you got to beat the Titans, you got to beat the Texans. And the Texans still have not won a game. You don't want to be the one that gives up that first win. So the Jags have got to come out and they got to make this a statement game.
They really do. Yeah. But moving over to our first 2 o'clock game where we have the 49ers versus the Panthers. And again, this kind of feels like what we were talking about with the Jags and Texans. It feels like the 49ers are just going to dominate the Panthers. And I, again, Baker Mayfield, I don't know if you can say he's played bad, but he just hasn't really done enough to really go out there and win. You
Yeah.
know, 747 yards, 4 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. You look at that and you go, those aren't stellar numbers. They're not bad numbers. You kind of look at the team that he has around him. He doesn't have an amazing team around him on the offensive side. Like, he definitely had better players with him in Cleveland, which of all things is a weird thing to say. But like, Matt Rule just has not been able to really take this team and move them forward. And obviously the 49ers, they looked much better last week. And I think they're just going to go out there and they're going to dominate.
They are. I mean, the Panthers won one this week or this year, and they only won because they had a play that finally blew up on them. They had a wide open wide receiver down the sideline for Baker Mayfield to throw it to. Minus that one play, they're a winless team.
Yeah.
Like that's what it comes down to. And like they don't put enough out there every week to instill any confidence in me to pick them to win a game, especially against the Niners team where George Kittle last week looked great. He's looking like he's feeling better.
He looked like he was back to his old self. And
Yep.
when he's back to his old self with Jimmy Garoppolo, they have that connection. Boy, oh boy, is that scary.
Yep.
Those
and
those
Deebo
Illinois
Samuel's,
boys getting back together.
Yep. Samuel's settling back into that, receiver anywhere position. We've seen him running out of the backfield, taking the jet sweeps, slot wide out. He's doing everything. And Garoppolo's accuracy and confidence is just going to get better. As long as this offensive line can protect him, he's going to be fine. The only question marks in San Fran right now are the defense. They're a little beat up, so that could give the Panthers some opportunity to score some points, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I think the 49ers are going to make easy work of this Panthers team.
Yeah, so for our last 4 picks here, we're going to kind of do a little bit more of a speed because I know you got to get ready to start heading out here shortly. Cowboys, Rams. I'm going with the Rams. I just trust them a little bit, even though the Cowboys are surprisingly 3-1.
Yeah.
The Rams definitely, they've had some ups and downs, but I feel more confident going with the Rams for this game. Sterling, what's your thoughts?
I agree. The Rams aren't going to collapse like some of the other teams have against this Cowboys defense. That being said, the boys defense, it's still one of the best in the league, if not the best.
Yes.
They are doing some phenomenal things and putting up some big numbers. I just don't think it's going to be enough for them to go into LA and beat the Rams. The Rams are going to come out with a win here.
Micah Parsons is a bad man. Next game up here, we have the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Arizona Cardinals. The Eagles, they are the best team in football right now. They're Jalen Hurts. He is looking at the management very similar to the way that Lamar Jackson. The only difference is Lamar Jackson's going "fuck you, pay me," and Hurts is going "fuck you, play me."
Yeah, the other difference I'll say is Lamar Jackson. We've seen his ceiling. We know how good he can play. I don't think we've seen the ceiling for Jalen Hurts yet.
I agree.
Yeah, I think we could still see more from Jalen Hurts, which is a scary thought, man.
Yeah. Yes, it is very. I think from both of these statements, we're both picking the Philadelphia Eagles over the Arizona Cardinals on that one.
Yes.
Moving over to our Sunday night football game where we have the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Baltimore Ravens. Since this is your division, I'm going to let you take the lead on it.
This is a tough one, because these two teams, it's one or the other. Which one's going to win the division? And I think this game is going to be the one that sort of decides that right away in the season here. If the Bengals lose this game, then they could potentially be looking at sitting in last place in the division at the end of this week. Isn't that crazy to think about? Bengals sitting in last place if they lose. Like, it's absolutely nuts. That being said, this O-line finally has their shit together, and Joe Burrow is able to turn it on finally.
Yeah.
Jamar Chase has been having a weak year this year, but he's getting double covered every game. I think this is the game we see Jamar Chase break things out, because this Ravens defense isn't as good as some of the ones that they've gone up against so far. And I think Chase is going to be able to break some of these double coverages and make some big plays.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a high scoring Sunday night game this week. It's going to be a fun one to watch. I can't wait for the Sunday night game. I think we're going to see it rival that game that we saw between the Lions and the Seahawks for possibly the highest scoring game this season so far. I think we see it be a 42-38 final, but the Bengals will win.
Yeah, I think the Bengals are gonna win. I with that O-line, I've been saying it is once that O-line figures it out and they start giving Joe Burrow some time, and we need to remember that yes, he also has Jamar Chase, who is without a doubt their number one wide receiver, but they still have T. Higgins, Tyler Higbee, they have Joe Mixon. They have a lot of players on that offense that they need to get the ball to. And the fact that T. Higgins and Tyler Higbee have been upping their game as much as they have this year, it just bodes well for Jamar Chase. I think Jamar Chase, he's looking at, hey, if the team's winning and we're doing good things, I don't need to get the ball all the time. I know that I'm still that good. But yeah, I don't trust the Baltimore defense. And that's at the end of the day the biggest thing for me. I'm picking the Bengals to win this game. I think you are as well. But yeah, moving over to our Monday night football game where we see the 1-3 Las Vegas Raiders versus the 3-1 Chiefs for now the second time this season. And is it the second time, or was it the Chargers and Raiders that played in week 1?
I think it was the Chargers.
Yeah, I'm just going to look that up, but give us
Either way, like an extra day of rest for Patrick Mahomes.
It was the Chargers, yeah.
Yeah. He made the Bucks look weak last week, and he is going to do the same thing to the Raiders this week.
It's hard.
Honestly,
it's very hard to bet against the Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, especially when they're at Arrowhead Field. They have an extra week, or like they have an extra day of recovery time and prep time. You know, the Raiders finally got their first win over the Donkeys, and I have officially said they are not allowed to be called the Broncos until they start to actually play better than what they're doing. They are the Donkeys, but
so the only way that the Raiders can pull a win out in this game is to do the same thing as you said last week. Use Josh Jacobs.
yes.
To beat Patrick Mahomes and this KC team, they're going to have to do the same thing you would do against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. You got to run the ball, you got to control the clock, you have to have the time of possession, and you have to make no mistakes.
Yeah. I think both of us, though, were both leaning towards the Chiefs in this one.
I think the Chiefs are going to win this one.
But yeah, as we do when we get close to the end of the podcast, we talk about our top 5. So Sterling, what is your top 5 for this week?
My top 5 this week, sitting at number 1, is the only undefeated team in the league, in the Philadelphia Eagles. They have elevated themselves to that number 1 spot, being the only undefeated team. Behind them, I have the AFC rivalry that we've been seeing in the playoffs. Bills at number 2, Chiefs sitting at number 3. After that, I have the Baltimore Ravens sitting in my number 4 spot. They did lose last week, but it was a close, tight game against the Bills, and they've got another tough game this week against the Bengals. So they're still looking good. They're playing well. And my number 5 right now, it's sort of been a bit of a revolving door, but for now, it's the New York Giants.
Fair enough. But yeah, for me, my number 1 team, similar to yours, is the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, they're the only winless team. And it's not like they're the only winless team because they've been playing really bad teams. They've been playing really, really well. So for me, they're my number 1 choice. Next team, I actually have it swapped from your 2 to 3. My number 2 team is the Kansas City Chiefs. My number 3 team is the Buffalo Bills. My number 4 team is actually the Cincinnati Bengals. I trust them, and that old line has started to connect things. And I think, again, like what we just said, Bengals, you give them protection and you give Joe Burrow protection, very dangerous. And I just can't trust the Ravens to finish a game right now. That has been a big problem. And the number 5 team for me, and this one makes me a little bit sick to my stomach to say, that's the Green Bay Packers. You know, they've just with all the concerns that we've had for their offense with the lack of talent at wide receiver, Packers are still 3-1. They still look like that team. They have a better defense this year, and they deserve, in my opinion, to be that number 5 spot.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I fully expect my 4 and 5 to change by next week, likely to the two teams that you have in the 4 or 5 spot.
Yes, but we would like to thank everyone for sitting down and hanging out with us today. We'd like to remind you all that if you like our content, you hit that like and subscribe button, and also make sure to check out the videos that we post weekly, where we adding more and more content each week. So please make sure to check that out. Please leave in the comments if you'd like to see any video suggestion ideas for us to talk about in the future. But that's all for us today. We'd like to thank you all for coming out again. Peace.